Hello, AP English Language and Composition students. Mr. Francavilla here. This should be lesson 22, and it is going to be focused on the Francis Bacon letter to King James I. I want to explain to you, give you hints on some of the techniques that Francis Bacon used in the early 1600s to request that the king get him out of the Tower of London prison. It did work, and he was released within 4 days. But when an author is writing, you want to analyze the tone and the meaning, the idea, the tone, are the goals of the author to create a certain message, to persuade through an argument, and to also express a certain tone. And so far I have not explained to you that tone is the author's attitude towards two things. Towards the subject matter about which the author is speaking. What does the author think about this idea? And tone can also be the attitude of the author towards his or her audience. In this case it's the king, King James I. So, in this passage, in this letter, we do start to get the tone right away. This I will tell you. There's a lot of respect towards the king, but this letter is a great example of one of the three options that an author has towards the audience. Will the author speak on an even level, speak to the audience as peers, as equals? Will the author speak to the audience as lower than himself or herself, so condescendingly, patronizingly? Or will the author speak up to the audience beseechingly, pleadingly, respectfully? The final one is the case in this letter. So we do get a tone when he says, "My poor service is graciously accepted by your majesty." You can see that he is creating a tone of groveling. He's lowering himself. He's speaking from a lowly perspective up to the king. He's speaking beseechingly, pleadingly. He's speaking up. So we do get that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. It's pretty obvious in this letter. So let's move on to other techniques. So, the techniques in this letter will fall into different categories. Some are sound devices, right? The repetition of initial consonant sounds is alliteration. The repetition of the same vowel sounds in words close together is assonance. But we do have alliteration throughout this letter. When we do have alliteration, it is meant to convey an idea, not just to link sounds together to make them sound good. But we see it here. Well, you have to fill in the blanks. Why does Francis Bacon follow up the reference to the king, referring to him this way, and then this about himself? I'm not going to tell you everything. You figure it out. Okay, you fill in the gaps. So moving on. Okay. So right here, this paragraph is the one I want to focus on. And again, we do have alliteration just like at the beginning. It is pretty extreme. And it's just a case that you have to connect the dots. Francis Bacon is conveying a message subliminally, not on the surface, under the surface. He's in a position where he can't be demanding of the king, but he can try to manipulate the king's thoughts and feelings by suggestion, by implication, right? So you connect it. I'm telling you, alliteration is going on very perceptively here. It's very obvious, I mean. But you explain it. Explain what's going on. What's the real message between the lines? Okay. Now, moving away from that, this new paragraph. It's good. I mean, this is a paragraph for a reason. Everything in it works together for one point. I'm going to point to things. I'll tell you what's going together for a message. This word. This word. And it's not just about alliteration, though it's still going on here. This word. This word. What do they all have in common? This word. This word. This word. You might not know. You might not have enough knowledge and understanding this category that it's referring to. But if you do, put it together, it will be very meaningful. I will tell you that this reference, blot the name quite out of your book, it's not literal in a certain sense. It's an allusion. All right? It's a reference to something outside of the context of this writing. It really doesn't have to do with the king. All right? But it's supposed to make the king think about something. In his own power, he could be like something, do something. So, certain words go together, a little bit of alliteration, but they all suggest an idea to the king that Francis Bacon is not stating directly. All right, so now, last paragraph. All right, so right here, I guess I did go a little further than I wanted to. This is actually a technique that you should know the actual name of. It's a type of scheme constituted by those words and the way they relate to each other. And so that is a technique, but it's more accentuated later on. Right here, this is a type of figurative language. You should know the name for that. I'm pointing it out to you. It's a little difficult to figure out how this makes Francis Bacon's message more effective, but try to figure it out. When you capitalize an abstract term like this, you are actually constituting some sort of figurative language, which I'm not going to tell you the name of. Now, we have some very specific schematic techniques.